We are live.
1, 2, 3, 4.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to West by Pod, a podcast about your completely unproblematic West Virginia University Athletic Department, the Big 12, and new challengers approaching. I'm Joel Bracken at WV Stats Guy on Twitter, joined as always by Jordan Pinto. He's at Game Day Shorts. Jordan, how are things going? Hope you're having a good summer. How is morale right now?
Morale is high within the household personally. We have a basketball coach. I guess that's something that you can say. I think there were probably various points over the last week or so when I thought about how this is probably the lowest point for West Virginia athletics in my lifetime. But we have a coach now. Kirk Krissa says he's coming back. Jay Kuntz is working hard on the other two. So, maybe the sky isn't falling all the way. But I don't know, man. How have you been? Had a little hiatus here.
Yeah, a little time away. Haven't been watching, obviously, not a lot of college sports. There's college baseball going on, which the World Series has been interesting. But, I don't know. Not too much following this stuff kind of wears you down. So I just acknowledge that, in the dark ages of WVU athletics right now, we are still potting through this. So, I kind of agree. I do think this might be the low point in my fanhood as well, just in terms of like optimism going forward. There's not a ton to really point towards and be like, oh, we're building this, we're moving in this direction. I think basketball is what it is right now, and football, we know the situation. It's got to be wins this year or things are going to change. So, I think, we're definitely getting our money's worth out of Ren Baker. He's having to make a lot of big decisions in his first 6 months on the job. So he's kind of been thrust into this pretty quickly and making some big shots. So
I've been watching a lot of Spider-Man with my daughter over the last couple weeks now that the Across the Spider-Verse came out, and I think Peter has a line at one point is like, the best way to learn is when under life-threatening pressure. So like Ren Baker's just like thrown all the way into the deep end here. You have to replace your Hall of Fame basketball coach. You have the football hire looming. I'm sure, it's been a little bit more exciting than he probably bargained for, but, hey, put your big boy pants on and make some decisions here. I'm glad it's him and not me, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, those are tough calls to make. And yeah, you mentioned it, the football, hire potentially could be looming, obviously, I think you can always get your optimism up by the end of the summer, beginning of fall, and maybe we're going to get you in that direction. Maybe we won't. I don't know, but maybe you'll learn something at least a little bit about our opponents coming up. So, sort of as our first kickoff episode, I guess you would kind of call season 2 of West by Pod. So today we're going to be just talking Big 12, kind of as a whole. So we're talking the tiers kind of within the conference, and then looking at some of the over-unders that Vegas has put out, and just sort of see where everyone's falling. I think the schedule for, as the summer progresses, is going to be more focused on West Virginia's opponents specifically. So now with the Big 12, 14 teams this year, WVU will not play all of them. So looking like we'll do our deep dive episodes, kind of like last summer, digging in probably 2 teams an episode, and we'll run through the 12 game stretch that West Virginia will play. 11 Power 5 teams. So it is a beefy schedule. Once again, one of the only teams in the country doing that. So, no sweat, Neil Brown. But like you said, backs against the wall. It's time to figure things out.
Absolutely, yeah. Now he's kind of started. I feel like recruiting's going well. Neil's kind of come out of his cave a little bit with regards to the media. I feel like he went into hiding for as much as he could have over the spring. But definitely he's not shy about mentioning how hard our schedule is. So, and how we're one of the only teams that plays the 11 P5s. He brings that up constantly. Let's. So what do we want to get into the Vegas tiers here? Then run through the over-unders.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I kind of sorted these teams into 4 tiers just based on what Vegas is saying the odds are to win the conference. So this, will not have like out of conference things baked in. When we talk about win totals, obviously that does have out of conference games baked in, and just kind of like we were talking about, the out of conference schedule can vary from team to team. West Virginia once again is playing the hardest, or top three hardest in the conference out of schedule or out of conference schedule. But yeah, so just kind of getting this kicked off here. So the first tier is just the under 500, under plus 500 odds to win the conference. And, I think Vegas did a decent job of sort of drawing the lines and really separating the conference into four tiers. The first tier being Texas, Oklahoma, and K-State. So these are the teams that Vegas thinks are going to be favored. Texas is plus 125 to win the conference. So, nearing like a 50% shot there to win. We have Oklahoma at plus 340, which I think is an interesting number. Kind of, wild to see them up there firmly in second place. And then K-State plus 470. Do you have any initial reactions on that sort of top class in the Big 12?
No, I think it it definitely makes sense to have Texas at the top. The Oklahoma one is the odds to win the conference. I don't know. I don't know if I like them as much at 340 as I do Kansas State at 470. But I mean, just in terms of who has the inside track, I think it makes sense. Those are probably the three likeliest teams, two of those three to end up in the Big 12 championship game. So no, not too much of a bone to pick with that initial tier.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Texas and K-State would probably be the top two for me. And then, yeah, Oklahoma is definitely, you're getting the name recognition and the sort of history behind it, bumping you into that plus 340 odds. So then our second tier, so this is already like a pretty significant jump. So now we're looking at plus 1,000 to plus 2,000 odds to win the conference. We got Texas Tech coming in at plus 1,100, Baylor coming in at plus 1,500, TCU, your national champion runner-up, they're coming in at plus 1,900. So this is kind of the established second class in the conference. What are you feeling about that, Jordan?
I think it makes sense to have these three grouped together. The Baylor and the TCU, it feels like, I mean, we'll get into them with the deep dives later this year, but feels like a lot of benefit of the doubt being given to those teams. I think TCU had a magical season last year. It feels like they're kind of riding the coattails of that, maybe more than they should be, just considering how much talent that they lost. And then Baylor, I don't know. I mean, Texas Tech is my favorite of those, so it makes sense to me that they have the best of the group there. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I do feel like, so just for like some reference, so like what do these odds always mean? We can calculate back out the implied probability that Vegas is sort of offering. So for TCU, plus 1,900 means their implied probability is 5% to win the conference. When you look at it in that way, you're like, wow, that kind of feels low. But, obviously, and we'll talk about it briefly here in a little bit, but, TCU is losing. They lost everybody. They lost the entire, offense that made the thing go, get you to the national championship. So, I think the classes are right, and we'll pick our bones with the sort of tiering in a little bit. But once again, I think this is the right grouping of teams to have in the second tier. So that moves us now to the third tier, the plus 3,500 to plus 5,000 tier. We have UCF, newcomer with the best odds of the newcomers, plus 3,500. Iowa State, plus 4,000. Kansas, plus 4,800. And Oklahoma State, plus 5,000. I'll just start here. The immediate surprise to me was Kansas. I feel like maybe, what you extract from last season where they started off 5-0 or 6-0 and sort of limped to the finish line without Jalen Daniels. But you look at their returning production, they're like the top team in the country, the top team in the conference as well, with what they're bringing back. To see them plus 4,800 to win the conference, I mean, I don't know if they're going to win the conference, but I definitely noticed their win total, which we'll talk about here in a little bit.
Yeah, I think if you were just, saying I'm going to take one team from each of these tiers and bet them to win the conference, I think of UCF, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State and Kansas. Kansas is the one that I would take a shot on just for the reasons you mentioned. You have a ton of returning production. You have Jalen Daniels coming back, who, one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the conference. Also makes sense to me to have UCF up there for the same reason. You have the coaching stability. If a team is largely, the success is driven largely by who the coach is, and quarterback stability, having John Rhys Plumlee and Jalen Daniels. I think both of those teams, honestly, I would probably rather bet either of those teams than Texas Tech, Baylor, or TCU. So I don't know. The one that, again, another coaching benefit of the doubt to me is Oklahoma State. And, it feels weird to be as down on them as I am, but they were such a mess towards the end of last season. And then there's so much uncertainty with them this year. I feel like having them in this group and not even in that bottom foursome with us just feels like you're giving Gundy just, a ton of credit to sort of figure things out. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they bounce back this year after the way they finished last year.
Yeah, that is one of the more interesting teams to me as well, Oklahoma State. So moving to our last tier, this is the plus 7,000 and longer odds than that. So we have West Virginia at plus 7,000, followed by 3 of the 4 newcomers. Cincinnati's at 7,000, BYU's at 10, Houston at plus 12,000. And then just for reference, a plus 7,000 odds means they are giving West Virginia 1.41% chance to win the conference. And I feel like when you look at all these offseason lists of coaching, of, power rankings, all this stuff, I haven't really noticed the theme of like the new teams kind of have gotten lumped together with West Virginia somewhere near the bottom in a lot of categories. Like I said, coaching, just general rankings. Do you feel like that's a fair assessment that, all these teams come in at the floor, but that's also kind of where we're laying right now as well?
I mean, it's hard to argue too much based on the last couple years, really most of the Neil Brown era. There hasn't been a ton to be excited about, right? So, I think it makes sense, I guess, for us to be down there. Hopefully that just means we're good value to hit that over. Where we got a lower win total than we deserve. I don't know. I think we have better rosters than the other 3 teams that we're grouped with here at the bottom. I think we clearly have the best roster of the 4, but we got to go out and prove it at some point, right? It can't just be something that us homers think and say and talk about. It has to be something that shows up on the field. So, hard to argue too much. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only thing I guess is Kansas is, other than last year, it's like there's been, 12 plus years of nothing. So giving the 1 year that they kind of get this bump versus, some of these other programs is surprising to me. But yeah, I mean, this is a prove it year for West Virginia, obviously. All these new teams, I think it's interesting. They all kind of are coming in, maybe not at the peak of where they have been. They're all kind of like they've clearly like made it into the conference, but it's almost like they're staggering into the conference. They're not like, it's not like a team that's coming in and won 12 games last year and they're like, hey, we're ready to compete. They're like going to be, I think all of them are going to be fighting for their footing and, are going to be in the middle to bottom part of the conference. So I think that's interesting just with that arrival of all these teams. Obviously have had success in the last few years, but nobody's coming in like on maybe their lead foot. If I had to give you a value bet of what we've seen here, if we're just picking straight to win the conference, and I might caveat as I don't have the odds here, but if you could find odds to make the conference championship, my value bet here might be Texas Tech. Plus 1,100, get 11 times on your money. So you bet $100, you win 1,100. Yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, Texas, those odds are short. Oklahoma, I don't like it. Kansas State at 470. Also, I'm intrigued. That's one maybe, but K-State or Texas Tech might be where I would throw a value bet in there.
Yeah. I mean, if you're trying to pop for more than basically even money on Texas, I mean, Texas is obviously the safest bet. They have the lowest odds, but yeah, I think I agree. K-State brings back a ton. They obviously lose Deuce Vaughn. They lose the flashy piece, but did some nice work in the portal, I think, in their running back room. Bring a ton back on the offensive line. Texas Tech, man, they're one. We'll talk about it, I think, in the over-unders, but they were a competitive team last year. You could tell that they nailed the hire of Joey McGuire. The team was bought in. and year 2 is generally when you would see, maybe a little tiny leap. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, plus 1100 to win it. I would guess that, if you could get odds to just to make the game, it'd be probably somewhere in the plus 500, 600 range, something like that, which I think would be a very attractive bet. So, no,
Mhm.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, those would be the ones to keep eyes on. I think Oklahoma's way overpriced here. Plus 340, I don't like that. And I think that's probably a good segue. So now working our way into looking at the win totals of these teams. Once again, this now does incorporate the out of conference. So I think the plan here is we're going to kind of just spend a couple minutes on each, talk about the win total with whatever factors, kind of bake into that: returning production, quarterbacks, coaches, out of conference schedule, all of that, and then we're going to make our call over under. We shared our notes right before, and independently we agreed on, what was it, like 13 out of the 14. So kind of just funny that we both had similar agreements. I think last year we were 8 out of 10, and I was
Yeah.
up on Kansas, and I think were you
I was
down on Baylor?
down
Or
on Baylor. Yep.
yeah, and I think we kind of split that one. So starting from the top, there's one team in the conference that has a win total of 9.5, which is the highest. That team is Texas Longhorns, and they are going to be the favorites in the conference. This is a surprising number to me, just because they have one out of conference game that is going to be really tough, and that's at Alabama. They also play Rice and Wyoming at home, so nothing crazy there. Thinking Quinn Ewers is going to be the quarterback. Sarkisian returning for another year. But Texas is getting a lot back, especially looking at their offense. They're number 3 in the country in returning production for an already pretty potent offense last year. 9.5 wins means if you say they lose to Bama, that means they would go 8-1 in conference, and they would break the 9.5 total. So I have them as an over. Jordan, do you have anything to comment on the Longhorns?
Yeah, I was just surprised to see him sitting at third in the offensive returning production, considering they lose Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson, right? Obviously, on paper and in my head, and having watched those guys, it seems like that was a much bigger chunk of their production than that. But yeah, I mean, they bring back, like you said, they bring back Ewers. I think they bring back their entire offensive line, including a couple of true freshmen who were both awesome last year, probably figure to be even better this year. Could be the kind of offensive line where it doesn't even really matter that much who the running back is. Obviously loaded at wide receiver, loaded at all the skill positions offensively. For me, I think they're one question mark is they turned over a little bit in the middle of their defense. And so, if those guys can hit the ground running, obviously Texas recruits at a higher level than any other team in the conference. So if they can hit the ground running and Quinn Ewers kind of pops the way that people think that he's going to, I think over makes sense.
Yep, 8.5 or 8-5 last year. So you're looking at like a 2-win jump, but
5 losses by 1 score last year as well. I think they lost five games by like a combined 20 points or something like that. So
yeah, and I mean they took Bama to the line and probably should have won that game. So you get a little revenge game. Obviously, this one's now in Bama, but I don't know if that's a coin flip game, but Texas has a chance in that game. And if they get past Bama with a win, like, you must be feeling really good about that number, 9.5. So it's a high number. It is the only 9.5 in the conference. But we're both actually going to go over on the Longhorns.
Worth mentioning as well. You're getting plus 152 if you bet the over 9.5 as well. You're getting minus 124. So Vegas thinks that Vegas thinks they're going over. So the money thinks they're going over. So
gotcha. Good call there. So our next team. So like I said, Texas, the only 9.5. There's only one team in the conference with an 8.5 win total. So really got a lot of clustered in the same, 2 to 3 win range. But at 8.5 wins, we have Oklahoma. Last year, Oklahoma 6-7. It was their first year under 8 wins in this century. So it's been a long time, and I haven't even looked at how long it's been since they've gone back-to-back years at that level. They're thinking Dylan Gabriel's going to be the quarterback this year, and I think a pretty cushy out-of-conference schedule. So this, I think, definitely contributes to the 8.5 number. We got Arkansas State, SMU, and at Tulsa. Don't know why they're traveling to Tulsa. Kind of interesting there, but um, yeah, this team last year was probably the most underwhelming Oklahoma team I've seen in my entire life. They didn't have the potency that we were used to, and 3-6 in conference. That's pretty daunting. In case you forgot, West Virginia was 3-6 in conference last year. Like that's kind of hard to compare the two. So this year, they're kind of in the middle of the road in returning production. Obviously now second year under Venables. I'm going to lean to under for the Sooners.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Last year, big time year zero vibes. I thought they were kind of a mess, but at the same, they bring back the quarterback, lose a lot of stuff, a lot of skill position talent, a lot of stuff on the offensive line. I don't know. I think maybe year two under Jeff Lebby as well. Maybe the offense takes a little jump because I know Dylan Gabriel, like when he was coming in, everybody kind of hyped that he had succeeded in this offense previously. I think they'd be better, but I don't know if I'd bet over 8.5. 8.5 feels high to me.
Yeah, it feels high, and still have some memories of the defense that Oklahoma fielded last year just being lost, and the 49-0 drubbing that Texas gave them. I think Oklahoma is going to probably be improved, but I think the middle to upper middle class of the Big 12 is pretty strong this year, and 8.5 wins. I'm just not seeing it for the Sooners.
Agreed.
All right, so now into our next sort of step down here. We got 4 teams at 7.5 wins. The first of which we'll talk about are the Baylor Bears. Last year, 6-7, and not the trending in the correct direction that you would want with Dave Aranda. I think there's been some interesting stuff in the Big 12 recently. I think especially with Aranda and with Matt Campbell, where there was like this trend, and everyone's like, these guys are awesome coaches, and then the trend is kind of reversed in recent years, and now it's like, hey, what kind of coach is this guy? Did he have this like one off, and hey, now we're actually trending in the wrong direction. The Baylor night game in Morgantown last year was memorable to me. So that was, probably the lasting imprint I had of that team. And it seemed like an undisciplined, out of character team for what you think of Dave Aranda. 7.5 wins this year is the line. They have Texas State. They have Utah, very difficult out of conference game. And then a bunny versus LIU. So 7.5 wins. I have Baylor trending downwards, and I have them on the underline.
Yeah, I think that I kind of feel the same way. Maybe a slight under, maybe a 6-6 or a 7-5. But yeah, man, lost four games in a row to end the season last year. So it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of get the vibes picked back up. I think when you look at the kind of team that Baylor's been, it's been a very like offensive line, kind of hang your hat on the offensive line thing. I know they bring Richard Reese back, who's probably going to be one of the premier running backs in the conference, but you lose a ton up front. 4 out of the 5 starters are gone. So, for me, I think it's the question is, can the defense be good enough to carry the offense until the offensive line gels? So We'll see. I don't know. Like you said, Utah, not the funnest test out of the box there for them early in the season.
No, that's a really rough test, but you'll learn a lot about a team when they have a tough out of conference. Baylor at least has a test out of conference.
You might be feeling a lot better. Yeah, if they come out of Utah with a win, you'll be feeling decent if you bet that over 7.5.
Yep. So next team, 7.5 win total, Kansas State, and this is a number I really like for Kansas State. So last year, Kansas State 10-4. They beat TCU in the Big 12 championship game. I think the stock for Chris Kleiman is pretty high. Just looking around online, some of these coaching power rankings have him as number 1 in the conference, or in the top 3 in a lot of them. So I think they finished the season strong, especially like I said, beating TCU, who ends up in the national title game. I mean, they put the work in on Michigan. So this team was right there at the end of the year as one of the highest performing teams in the country. I think there's an argument to be made there. 7.5, the out of conference is, I think it's Southeastern Missouri, Troy, and then the at Missouri is the one that you got to keep an eye on. But just 7.5 for a team that won the title last year. Decent returning production, at least on the offensive side of the ball. I'm going to go with K-State on the over 7.5.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you. Obviously, the big loss is going to be I was going to say Deuce McBride, but Deuce Vaughn. Um, but they went out and got a guy in the portal. Man, I'm blanking on his name. Running back from Florida State, though, who had 2 solid seasons at Florida State and was just kind of a secondary back. Probably got promised a lot of touches here in Deuce Vaughn's absence. So, I don't know if he can step in and be quite the player that Deuce Vaughn was, but they definitely, I think a good pull there. Obviously, you have Will Howard. Another situation like Texas as well, where all 5 starters from a very good offensive line were back. So defense had some turnover, but we'll see. Kansas State's generally been pretty good at plugging and playing on defense and just kind of keeping the machine rolling. And yeah, like you said, yeah, I think they can sweep throughout a conference, and then that just means that they need to win five in conference to hit the over. So I think over's good. I like that over number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kansas State, and I'm excited to do our deep dives, but this is a team that the more and more I think about it and learn about them, I'm like, hey, this team might be really good, if not a sleeper, contender in this conference this year, which, sleeper, they won the thing last year, at least in the championship game. So
they're plus 1,600 to make the CFP.
Wow.
On FanDuel. So, they're, I want to say it's one of the 15 best numbers probably.
Yeah. Yeah. So segue now to TCU, the team that they faced in the conference championship game, and TCU lost. TCU last year, I mean, the magical season, if the Mountaineers ever did it, it would be, the season of all the dreams. 9-0 in conference, obviously losing the conference championship game, a slight blemish, but they still get in the CFP and take it all the way to the championship game where, the clock struck midnight on them on that night, but 13-2 season, just an awesome year. First year for Sonny Dykes. Just all the magic was rolling. This year, they have to play Colorado. Not a gimme. I mean, not anymore. Exactly. That's a team like you'd rather just not have to deal with that. Colorado, who knows what they're going to be coming out of the box.
So they're going to be the first game of the Deion Sanders era in Colorado.
And this is Colorado's Super Bowl in a way because they haven't had the hype and the excitement in a while. They're going to be ready to play. So Colorado start the season, Nicholls State, and then SMU. Always a tricky
sneaky
local
rivalry game. Yep.
Yeah, returning production on offense 128th. So one of the bottom 3 or 4 teams in the whole country. Obviously last year, the offense was electric, but you got nothing coming back. Like the entire production is gone. 7.5 wins feels high. I mean, TCU, it's like, I feel like this is the Sonny Dykes number. It is, do you feel like he's going to keep this thing rolling, or do you feel like it was lightning in a bottle? I think 7.5 in a there's going to be too many close games, too many tough teams in the middle of the conference. I'm kind of a tough out of conference. So I'm going to fade TCU on 7.5.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, in my opinion, that was probably a 9-win team last year. A good team, right? And obviously, credit for them for pulling, a handful of games out of their asses. Well, how many 2-touchdown second half comebacks did they have? Where that's just not something that happens consistently. Let alone the game that I thought that we gave them everything we wanted or everything that they wanted. Yeah, no, 7.5 feels. I mean, you lose everything offensively, and that's what made them special last year. The defense was fine, but what made them special was that they could go 80 yards in the blink of an eye. And without that this year, I mean, how are they any different than any of the other teams in the middle of the conference?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think if you were looking at, I mean, there's a lot of unpredictable things in this conference this year, but TCU refresh after going to a national championship out of nowhere in a way. That, it's very intriguing, and I don't have the confidence, I would say, to put like actual money down on that. I'm going to say under in our picks, but I would just stay away because, who the hell knows what they're going to be coming out of the box.
Maybe Sonny Dykes has that magic dust. Yeah, no, don't touch it. But I don't like, I think under. Yeah.
So our last team with 7.5 wins from Vegas is Texas Tech, 8-5 last year, 5-4 in conference. Joey McGuire, I think everybody likes this guy. First year in 2022, last year, they had their best record in 13 years. I mean, they really turned things around. And They mostly did it on the offensive side of the ball, but they kind of had a decent balance, especially for Texas Tech, the identity you usually think of Texas Tech. They're returning a decent bit on offense. I think the quarterback situation is the one thing. If it's going to be Baron Morton or Tyler Schuff, not sure there. Out of conference, you got Wyoming. Tough one at Oregon. That's probably a pencil down of a loss. And then you get Tarleton State for a free win. 7.5 is a really good number, I think, here, because I think you go 2-1 out of conference with Oregon, probably hand in a loss. But I kind of like the vibes coming out of Lubbock. And I really thought about this one for a while, and I'm going to lean up on Texas Tech, and I will take them over 7.5.
Yeah, I think in my picks I just put because like you said, it's a really good number. Yeah, I mean, coaching and quarterback situations are very solid. Seemingly, you have Tyler Shuck. If he gets hurt, Baron Morton played well last year. Multiple starts, took about 300 snaps and played well. So you have to feel good about that. They lose to Roderick Thompson, who was going on his second decade at the school, I think. So it makes sense that he's not there anymore. But Taj Boyd was their highest graded player on offense, so should be just fine. They lose Tyree Wilson. That's I'd say the biggest loss. Defensive end went in the top 10 in the NFL draft. Can they generate the same pressure that they did last year? But overall, I mean, yeah, like you said, 2-1 out of conference, and then you go 6-3 in the conference. I could probably talk myself into that. It's definitely not a game that I would pencil us in winning. I think I like them better than TCU, Oklahoma State. I probably like them better than Oklahoma. Over 7.5 feels right.
Yep. All right. So now we are down to the 6.5. There are two teams on the 6.5 line from Vegas. The first of which is Oklahoma State. I think this is an interesting inflection point for Oklahoma State. With Gundy, the sustained success, they were like class 1B in the conference for so long. Like they were always right there at the top. And then kind of a misstep last year, 7-6, 4-5 in conference. Spencer Sanders is gone for the first time in my life. He will not be the quarterback at Oklahoma State. So, this year, I think kind of a cushy out of conference. You get Central Arizona or Central Arkansas, South Alabama, and then a tricky game at Arizona State. But I kind of feel like Oklahoma State should be the favorite in that one. The number's 6.5. And, I think the big thing this year is like, can Oklahoma State figure out how to move the ball on offense? So they were the worst team in the conference on offense last year. Which is surprising that we weren't that team. So really figuring that out, you're going to have a new quarterback. I've seen lists with like 4 different quarterbacks potentially for Oklahoma State. 2 of which I've written down are Alan Bowman or Gunnar Gundy. But I've seen lists with others included of who's going to start. So I think just a lot of question marks. Obviously, if you bet the over, it's on Gundy. If you bet the under, it's on what the hell did they put out there last year, and it probably isn't getting better. Returning production's pretty low. I'm going to lean under for the Pokes.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't think this is better than a 500 team. Alan Bowman, he's another 2-decade guy. Nothing moving the needle there for me. Jaden Nixon's good. But the thing that they've really hung their hat on, and that's kind of saved them, like you said, considering how kind of bad they've been offensively, surprisingly, the last couple of years, is just that defense, 8 faces, right? And I think we saw a little bit of the turnover start last year when they lost a couple of linebackers. And then this year they're replacing, 3 of the guys up front who have really kind of, anchored that defense. So I don't know. They got a lot of shit to figure out, man. They were a mess towards the end of that. What did they lose? 6 out of the last 7 games of the season.
We were calling them the zombie Oklahoma State. Like they were fielding a team, but it hardly looked like they had a chance the last month of the season.
Yep. So they got a lot of shit to figure out. I don't know. I don't feel 6.5 feels just, it's a Gundy number, Yep. So we'll see. I like under though.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the other team with 6.5 wins in Vegas, this is the highest win total for any of the newcomers. We got Central Florida, UCF. Last year, 9-5, 6-2 in conference. Obviously this is the first year joining the Big 12. Um, and this is a tough one. And I honestly might change my number on this. I feel like I must be missing something on UCF because they're much higher than any of the other newcomers on odds to win the conference. Obviously, the higher win total. They have a really cushy out of conference: Kent State, Villanova, at Boise State. That's one of those ones. It's like, hey, you step into a P5, you really hope you could beat the G5 power, which maybe aren't even really powers anymore. Um, this is a good team on offense last year. They're losing a good chunk. They're on the lower half of the distribution of returning production for offense. 6.5 is a really good number, I think, for them. I think they're going to be fine out of conference. So then you're saying, can they pick up 4 more in conference? And I think that's tough. I think they're going to be firmly in the middle to middle lower part of the conference. I have written down under. This is another one I would probably stay away from.
Yeah, I'd stay away from it. And I think this is going to be their game against us could be the swing game for both of our teams' seasons. Just in terms of like if we're looking purely at the over under total, like 5.5 for us, 6.5 for them. If we win that game, I don't see how they get over 6.5. And if we lose that game, we probably aren't getting over 5.5. So I think under because I think we're going to beat them. I get the number. John Rhys Plumlee, exciting quarterback. And like you said, 3 very, very winnable games out of conference. So good number, but I think under.
Yep. Okay, so we have moved down to the 5.5s. There are 4 teams in conference at 5.5. Vegas says these teams are going to have a losing season. I mean, that's what they're telling us. And there are 6 teams in the conference they say are going to have a losing season. 4 of them at 5.5 wins. The first one's Iowa State. Last year, 4-8, 1-8 in conference. Out of conference this year, you got UNI. You have Iowa, which is always a rock fight, coin flip game. I mean, that's a 50-50. And then you got at Ohio University. At worst, you're coming out 2-1, maybe 3-0 in conference. You might be over halfway there by conference play starting. I think I'm a Hunter Decker's believer. Like, I think I'm on the train. The guy has a lot of raw talent. And I'm excited to see really with an offseason to develop and some continuity. We're really returning a lot of the guys on offense that they had last year. 28th in offensive returning production. I think 5.5 is gettable. I think, like I said, I think you can come out 3-0 in conference or out of conference play, and you can find 3 more, 3-6 in conference. I think it's totally possible for Iowa State. Interested about the Matt Campbell situation there. Once again, like an inflection point for a coach. The trend has, if you're thinking about a curve, they have definitely like rolled off the back, and it is in a downward moving direction. So got to be a year to right the ship, I think. And hey, I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go over 5.5 for the Cyclones.
Yeah, I think even if they lose to Iowa 2-1 out of conference, I could see them grinding their way to 4 wins in the conference. They were in a lot of very, very close games last year, and I think I'm a believer as well. I think we talked about it in our deep dive in our game preview last year that a lot of the guys that they had playing were part of that 2019 recruiting class. One of their most highly rated in school history, Deckers, Jarrell Brock, the running back. And maybe it was just a year too early for those guys. I think they were 3-year program guys, but I could see Matt Campbell and Hunter Deckers grinding their way to 6 wins. Maybe not, the ceiling might not be much higher than that. But just with the way that they generally play defense there, if the offense is even marginally better, it feels, 500 is attainable. So I'd say over as well.
Cool. So our next team at 5.5 wins is Kansas. Kansas last year, they started 5-0. Is that right? Or 6-0. And then they had the 5-0, then the long stretch of losing, and then they found one late to get to bowl eligibility. So 6-7, 3-6 in conference. They're the number 1 team in the country in returning production. Number 1 in offensive, number 8 in defensive. This team, you got Jalen Daniels coming back. You have a really soft out-of-conference Missouri State. Illinois, maybe not a soft game. And then at Nevada. But Illinois, I'm pretty sure, is at home. And that could be one of those games like, hey, we can beat another middle to lower part of the conference, Power 5 team. Really get the thing jump started. 5.5 wins. Like, once again, this is, if you come out of conference 3-0, you need 3 more. They went 3-6 in conference last year, and Jalen Daniels was out a lot of it. They're bringing everybody back. I think some of the portal moves and whatnot, like, this team is getting better, and there's like a vision that has been sold on this team. And I'm hitting the over. And if you listen to the pod last year, I hammered the over on Kansas, and I'm telling you to do it again. I really, really like the over Kansas 5.5.
Over 2.5 last year was brave of you, by the way. I have to,
and they hit it in week 3.
they hit it immediately. Yeah, no, I mean, they're another one like Iowa State. Even if you go 2-1 out of conference, right? They, it feels like there's probably 4 wins out there for them. My only question mark is, as good as Jalen Daniels and that offense was last year, like, did they get found out a little bit? Down the stretch, obviously started 5-0 and finished 1-7. Right. So, I kind of personally felt like if we had triple option tape, if we weren't kind of the guinea pigs, there's no reason we shouldn't have beat them last year. So I don't know, man. It's, I want to say over. I think they can get to 500. I don't know. It's tough. I think I'll say over because I'm a Jalen Daniels believer.
All right, so now West Virginia, 5.5. You might have heard of them. You might know a little bit about them. 5-7 last year, 3-6 in conference. Guess what? The out of conference doesn't get any easier. You got to open at Happy Valley, probably a top 10 Penn State team. And if you're still on your feet after that, we got Pitt at home in Morgantown a couple weeks later. West Virginia plays all 4 of the new teams in the conference. The only other team that does that is Oklahoma State. So we get all of the new guys. I think that's favorable. I think that's needed. Those are 4 teams that I think are coin flip or better odds to win. Like, those are teams that you feel like, hey, we can beat these guys. So say you win 3 of the 4 of those, you're going to beat whoever the out of conference, Duquesne. That's 4 wins already. And then maybe Pitt, that's 5. Go beat one other team that has existed in the conference. 5.5. Hey, if you can't get 5.5 wins, we're going to be hiring a new coach, and I think it's fully warranted. And I think everybody understands the expectations this year. They have to be higher. Would I put my own money on 5.5 over? Potentially. I will probably make that call a little later in the summer. But will I say over for the Mountaineers? Yeah, I will.
I will as well. I looked at this. I think my numbers are from last week, but you're getting plus 142 for over. So decent little bump there for hitting the over. But yeah, no, I mean, I think you laid out the path to success, right? It's 2-1 out of conference. You beat Duquesne and Pitt. You beat all 4 of the new guys. That's your 6 wins right there. And if you're doing that, then there are, every other game on the schedule is winnable. We are missing Texas, right? Do we play Kansas State? I think we missed Texas and Kansas State.
Yeah.
So,
we missed Kansas, but yeah, also Kansas State, no Texas. So, you get Oklahoma State in there. You get Oklahoma, Baylor to end the year.
Yep.
TCU's in there, Texas Tech. So,
Yep. And there's no reason we can't win one of those 5. So, yeah, no, I think over, again, I haven't put money on it yet. I probably am going to at some point. But, yeah, I think over 5.5, we can do that.
Gotcha. All right, last 5.5 win total team is Cincinnati. Coming in 9-4 last year, 6-2 in conference. They aren't returning anybody. 119th in offense, 105th in defense, and returning production. Out of conference, they got EKU. They got Miami of Ohio, and then they have to go to Pittsburgh and play at Pitt. 5.5 is the number. They just lost their coach. So they're going to be in the first year with Scott Satterfield, who went through Appalachian State for a while, had some success. Now he's coming off some pretty down years at Louisville. I think this is like the token, like, stumbling, limping into the conference. Like, I don't think Cincinnati's ready to compete this year. And like I said, at Pitt. Obviously, we know not the easiest game in the world. And there's some some history there too. That game means a little bit of something for those teams. So 5.5 wins. Someone's got to lose these games in the conference. I think a lot of them are going to be the new guys. I'm going to fade Cincinnati on 5.5.
Yeah, under. I think only 5 returning starters. The one I'd say feather in the cap is Emory Jones, the new quarterback. Skill set would on paper seem to be one that Satterfield can probably work with. But yeah, no, I mean, this isn't the team that went 12-0 2 years ago. This is a 9-4 team that is only returning 5 starters and is taking the jump to the Power 5 level. The travel, obviously, we know the impact of the travel. It's not quite as bad for them, but it's not a whole lot better either. And yeah, no, I think they're one of the teams that might get beat up on a little bit this year, just as they're kind of trying to find their footing.
Yep. All right, so that brings us to the 2 bottom teams, 4.5 wins for both BYU and for Houston. BYU was a non-conference team last year, an independent, 8-5 record. They'll have a familiar face at quarterback, Keaton Slovis, jumping all over the map. We saw him at Pitt last year. Now he is at BYU. Last year, this defense was bad. They were 118th in defensive beta rank. Last year, out of conference, a little cushy. You get Sam Houston, Southern Utah, and then you got to go play at Arkansas. So you think you get 2 free wins there. The number is 4.5. And once again, maybe BYU travel a little bit, not to the same extent as the East Coast teams, but that trip out to UCF, to Cincinnati, to WVU, those would be some trips. So I'm going to go down on BYU. They were plus 10,000 to win the conference, and I'm going to say under 4.5 wins.
Yeah, I said under as well. Keaton Slovis is another guy who doesn't really do anything for me. Actually, I think I might flip my last 2. I might go BYU over and say BYU gets the 5 wins. And then for Houston, who's the last team, I think they might go under. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about them other than what I've researched over the past couple of weeks. Out of conference isn't too bad. Quarterback is he's going to be a bottom half quarterback in the conference, I think. So I don't know. I don't see them like knocking anybody off, winning any games they shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that brings us to the final team, Houston. Last year, 8-5, 5-3 in the American. Houston is an interesting one for me because I'm surprised that they are the longest odds to win the conference and the 4.5 win total. Out of conference, UTSA, at Rice, and then Sam Houston. I think those are 3. I mean, UTSA has kind of shown something the last few years, but very easily could be 3-0, 2-1 at worst coming out of that. Last year, a pretty solid offense. I kind of like Donovan Smith at quarterback. He was at Texas Tech for a little bit. You might remember.
I do too, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like that. And I mean, we know what a Dana Holgorsen team is going to look like. Last year, they were pretty bad in defense, and they're turning over one of the biggest turnovers on defense in the country. They actually do have the biggest turnover on defense in the conference. But 4.5 wins, a lot of these, especially with the newcomers, it's like, what's the fit? What's the how they're going to adapt in the new conference? But I'm going to go up on Houston. I'm going to go over 4.5 wins.
Yeah, I'm going under. I like the Donovan Smith fit. Like you mentioned, I think we've seen Dana Holgorsen make things work with that kind of a quarterback, but you just look at the rest of the roster, and it's all transfers. They lost so much. When I was looking at their depth chart earlier in the year when we were kind of doing our spring ball, like they didn't even have a 2 deep filled out. So it's not an ideal scenario to be replacing your whole team in the first year that you make the jump to the Power 5 level. A couple of former Mountaineers on there. Michael Laughlin is down at Houston. Sam Brown, and then Tony Mathis. Right, Mathis transferred because if he got carries this year, we were going to be pissed off about it. And he's right now listed as their starter. So I just don't. I don't know. I think this and Cincinnati, in my opinion, are probably the 2 worst rosters in the league. And And if they win more than 4.5 games, I think it will be, just Dana Holgerson like offensive masterclass. So, we'll see what happens. But I'm going to say under. I flip to under.
No, I think that's totally valid. No, I think obviously somebody's got to lose the games in these conferences. Like everybody can't go over. That's just how the math works. If you had to pick one, I got two questions for you. First one is if you had to pick one over or under to triple hammer, which one are you picking?
Kansas State.
Kansas State, I think would be a hammer for me. If I had to give you a different one, I would go under UCF. I don't see it.
Really? Under 6.5. Okay.
Under 6.5. I mean, I get that the out of conference is easy. The Boise State game might be a trip up there, but I just don't know how many other teams in conference they're going to be able to beat. Other than maybe some of the other new guys, maybe they can beat up on some of them. But no, I think my favorite one though is the K-State over. I think that's free money right there.
I like under both of the Oklahoma schools.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's totally valid. I do like the under 8.5 Oklahoma. I would put that as I would bet real money on that one as well.
Under 8.5 when I looked last week was plus 184
for Oklahoma.
Yeah,
I might have to invest.
Yeah.
They always.
I don't see them being that much better.
When you're betting on a high number or a very low number, there's always so many ways. It only can go right to get over 8.5. That's a 9-win, 10-win, 11-win, whatever season. There's so many ways to be under. There's only a couple ways to be over
for sure
in a long season. So, I do like the under Oklahoma. I like the up on K-State. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay. My second question for you, actually. If you had to put money on of the newcomers of what you know about them, and I will admit also I'm still catching up on rosters and the go-abouts. If you had to put money on the highest win total of the 4 new guys, who are you putting it on?
I think UCF, but I still think under. I think that BYU and Houston and Cincinnati I think are probably going to be the 3 worst in the conference, and then I think UCF will be better than that, but I don't think that significantly so.
Yeah, I think UCF by default. Do you think any newcomer will be over 500? Because I guess by our bets we said no.
No.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think any of them will have a winning record in conference or winning record in general. We got the unders on the 6.5.
Yeah, no, it's like you said. I mean, they've all earned the invitation to the conference. I would say over the last handful of years, but they are not in the situation. They're not cresting right now, right? They're kind of for most of them, it would be year 1 or year 2 of a rebuild, and they're probably most of them are on the same 4 to 5 year cycle that we would like to think that we're on. So, they'll be fine. Just this year might be tough.
Yep. Okay, so kind of the last segment here. We're just going to sort of lay out our tiers, and we did this separately, but we've kind of walked through the tiers in different ways. How I would tier the teams, I have 4 tiers. I have the legit favorite, and that's Texas. I mean, I don't think there's any denying that they're going to be the most talented, skill-wise, and just, when we talk preseason, teams like Texas and Oklahoma always get elevated. But I think it's very fair to say Texas is the number 1 favorite. My second tier is the battle for Arlington. So this is who's gonna meet Texas in that championship game, and I have K-State, Texas Tech. And I have OU in here, but it is kind of just maybe an in between. I think K-State and Texas Tech, I feel good about being in that range. My third tier is upsideable, and a lot of that's kind of just coaching based of hey, these guys have done it before, they've shown something, and if they pulled off 2 or 3 wins more than they were expected. I could see it. And that's kind of a wide range. I have Baylor, TCU, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and I threw Kansas in there as well. They snuck up to 8 wins. I could see some upside. And then my last tier is just called Show Me Something, and it's the 4 new guys in West Virginia. And it's hey, What do you got? Can you get over 500? Can you be relevant in this conference? And I think, and unfortunately, I think it's fair to just say West Virginia is in that tier with them of like, hey, like get up off the mat and show us what you're made of, because I think these 5 teams are all going to be on the low end of expectation. So that's how I group the teams up.
Very, very, very fair. I mean, you look at all these preseason publications. The last handful that I've seen have us finishing last. Winning like 3 games. Yeah. So, I think that sentiment's definitely out there where people have lost all faith. There's not a whole lot of people trusting the climb outside of Morgantown, and there's not even a whole lot of people trusting the climb inside of Morgantown. So, So mine, I think I'm with you. Texas is the clear favorite. I think I had. The same 3 contenders who I think could maybe make a run at the conference championship game: Oklahoma Tech and Kansas State. Then I have kind of like the mid-table slog, and really I think that these are it's going to be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, all these teams it coin flip week to week, right? And so I think I have Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma State, Kansas, West Virginia, Iowa State. And then I have the newcomers in just their own tier at the bottom, because I think those are kind of the 4 most questionable teams. So, yep. That's I kind of see it 4 tiers as well. I don't know. I would be kind of surprised if any of the group, the slog group, make the run and get to the conference championship. I'd also be surprised if any of us fall down and get into that group at the bottom of the table. So, a lot of coin flip games out there this year, I think, for everybody but Texas.
Yeah, I think there's a strong middle class, and I think there's a strong lower class of like who's going to kind of rise out of it.
Because you're right. I mean, they're not bad teams like Cincinnati, Houston, BYU, UCF. Good programs. Just maybe not so much this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, all these like teams, fan bases, programs all want to step into the new conference on the right foot. But I think expectations of growing pains is probably the right prescription there, just for all those guys, because someone's going to want to. It's going to be obvious. Somebody's going to want to come in and be like, "Hey, we're the big dog of the new group" or whatever. But there's no clear team that's really fitting that mold to me. But excited to do our deep dives over the summer, especially for these new teams. Excited to learn more about them. Excited to learn more about Penn State and Pitt once again. And just get ready. I mean, we're in the countdown now towards fall, so exciting stuff.
So, man, this is great.
Yeah, good to get back into it. So, you guys can find us on Twitter at WestByPod with underscores in between. We'll tweet out the links to the episodes each week, and sometimes like some polls, questions, things like that. You can also get at us on smokingmusket.com, where we'll have an article up with the pod. And you can find us on Twitter individually. I'm at WV Stats Guy, and he is at Game Day Shorts. And thank you as always for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.
Talk soon, guys.
1, 2.